Hello greetings and welcome to your video on the causes of World War II. We're going to be taking some notes today, so please make sure you have your notebook and a writing utensil. So let's get started. Please underline your title, which is the causes of World War II. We have two learning objectives today. Firstly, I want to talk about the events that caused war in 1939. Why did war break out? We're going to go over some of those today. And secondly, we are going to get right into it and we're going to talk about some of the things that happened right at the beginning of the war. So remember guys, pause the video at any time. You can take your own notes. I do have bullet points on here, but you might want to shorten them or add some more notes based on what I'm saying over the slideshow, and that's all up to you guys. And if you have any questions, just ask me in our next lesson. Okay, let's get started. So our first cause, it's a big one and it is a long-term cause, is the Treaty of Versailles, which is actually a little bit funny because the Treaty of Versailles is what ended World War I. Basically when Germany lost because the Americans had entered World War I, so the Allies became more powerful. Everyone signed the Treaty of Versailles, and that meant a lot of bad things ended up on Germany's plate. So that included things like territorial adjustments. This is something we talked about in geography recently in our conflict unit. There's a lot of new countries, and there are some border changes. So here's a map from 1914, and here's one a year following the end of World War I. And you can see that Germany has lost some of its territory. Now I'm going to point out, here is a new country. This is Czechoslovakia. That's going to be important later on. Poland, of course, neighbors Germany. And we have France as well. So we're going to be talking about those countries later. So I just want to point out where they are. Okay, so that meant Germany lost some land. There's some new countries and things like that because of the Treaty of Versailles. As well as there's something called reparation payments. And a reparation is when you do something wrong and you have to pay for it, literally, when you have to give people money. Germany was forced to pay a lot of money to Britain and France because they had spent so much money on war. France, a lot of their towns got destroyed. They needed money. So Germany had to pay up. And that's going to force Germany to be in a state of poverty, basically. In addition, there's something called an armament restriction. See if you can figure that out. Armament restriction. So because Germany was told, you caused World War I, we can't have this happen again, they had to cut down on the size of their navy, the size of their army. They had to have something like 100,000 soldiers. That was all they were allowed to have. So their army is going to be a lot smaller. Therefore, they can never cause war again. We'll see. They were also faced with war guilt. Basically, in the Treaty of Versailles, it says Germany is to blame for World War I. That's something we can talk about in the next lesson because we know what caused World War I. And do we think that's all Germany's fault? Let's move on. So Germany felt awful after having signed the Treaty of Versailles. They're very bitter. They're also broke because they're paying a lot of money to all these other countries. The small point is that Italy is also disappointed in the Treaty of Versailles because they thought they were going to get some more territory, but they didn't end up getting it. So you can see the Italian boot right here, and that's its new boundaries after World War I. Okay, so leading back to that reparation payment. So there is going to be a huge economic depression. You may have heard the term, the Great Depression. And that happens between World War I and World War II. So the economies are very unstable in Europe. They've just spent so much money to pay for this war that lasted for 4 years. World War I went on for 4 years and they had to pay soldiers to fight. They had to, build all of these guns and tanks and planes and blimps and et cetera, et cetera. That's very expensive. So now they're not in, these countries aren't in very good shape. The US was looking pretty good for a while because they had the money and they were lending it to these European countries. But now these countries are broke, they can't pay the US back. So what happens in 1929 is there's something called the stock market crash, and that caused the Great Depression. Everyone lost their job. People can't afford to buy food and things like that. So that's happening in the US. That's happening in Germany. It's happening everywhere. So they are not in good shape right now. All right, so that is definitely a major cause that leads up to World War II. All right, let's get to our third one, appeasement. This is an important one. Appeasement is the act of giving in to an enemy's demands in hopes of avoiding further conflict. So make sure that's in your notes. Appeasement's very important to know. So we were just talking about the Treaty of Versailles and all these things that Germany has to do. Their borders change. They have to give lots of money to Britain and France and blah, 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 all of these things. And Germany is very agitated because of it. They aren't happy. And when Hitler comes to power, he's going to push back on some of those things. And because people are so scared of another big war, they decide, okay, you know what, we'll let Hitler get some of his ways. That way, he won't ever try to start a war. We'll allow him to have some of these things to make him happier. We'll try to please him, which might be a good way of thinking what appeasement is. If you're trying to please an enemy, just so they're not pushing for war. Okay, so in 1938, Hitler wanted part of Czechoslovakia, which he called, or Germans called, the Sudetenland, which you'll see right here, Sudetenland. Basically, it's an area of Czechoslovakia where lots of Germans live, and he thought, those are German people, I want that territory back. They need to be part of Germany. I'm just going to switch back to this map quickly, and we can just pull that up. So you can see where Germany used to be in this land. It's a new country. Czechoslovakia is a new country. So he wants that land back. So they decide, okay, you know what? You can have that land back. So the British and French prime ministers agreed to Hitler's demands without even consulting the leaders of Czechoslovakia, of that country. So Hitler gets that land back. Here you can see an agreement. This is the Prime Minister of Britain and Hitler. They're shaking hands because they have given him that land back. Maybe you've heard that saying, give an inch, take a mile. We might see that because they've sort of set this precedent of, okay, yes, you can have your way with this one thing, that Hitler might try to push for more things to get his way more often. Okay, so appeasement is our third cause of war. Please make sure you have this in your notes. Okay, and our last one, I'm pretty sure you guys know quite a bit about this because you read The Book Thief earlier this year. It seems like a long time ago. And I believe in that book they talk a lot about the Hitler Youth and this growth of Hitler's military. So militarism, hopefully you remember this from your last unit, but it's the idea, this glorification of war in which a nation strengthens its military and grows its weapons and its navy and its tanks and all that sort of thing. It's an important aspect of militarism is the glorification of war. And in World War II, we see that when Hitler starts pushing the younger generation to get involved in war and joining the military at a young age. So they have the Hitler Youth Group where boys do things like camping and wrestling and sports. And the idea is that when they grow up, they're going to want to join Hitler's army. And he's not the first person to think of this. This idea has been around for a long, long time. Hopefully you guys remember when we were talking about Sparta. And the boys would go off, I believe it was at the age of 9, and they would practice fighting and become warriors at a young age. So Hitler was just copying societies before him that have done that. Okay, so militarism is going to be another cause of war. Quickly, I'm just going to mention some others. These are important, but you do not need to write these down. This is something you probably will talk about in high school if you take history, which I hope you do. We have Japan, which is becoming an imperialistic country. They are trying to expand, take over lots of areas, so they do actually get involved in conflicts with China. The USSR, which is Soviet Russia, and we will see that they do attack the US. We have the growth of communism. If you guys remember from your debate, the communists were red. Here's a flag right there. And we have the Soviet Russia, the USSR, is sort of leading the growth of communism at this point. So Hitler's going to be against that. We also have the US is not interested in global politics whatsoever. It's taking a very isolationist stance. Okay, and then here we have the guy named Mussolini, who's going to be a dictator in Italy. And if you remember earlier, I said Italy was not happy because of the amount of land that they got, or lack of land. And he's going to support Hitler. So those are some other causes of World War II. Okay, guys, I'm going to be brief. I do want this video to be under 15 minutes. Here we go. The first stages of war. So we're going to talk about a few stages of war. Today, I'm just going to show you this one slide, and this is about the Phony War. So when war broke out in 1939, and up until about 1940, this first year of war, historians call it the Phony War. So we have Germany, who, as I've already said, has invaded Czechoslovakia. They've taken that land. France and Britain have agreed to it in what many people thought was a very spineless thing to do. So the Prime Minister at the time in the UK, Neville Chamberlain, doesn't have a good reputation to this day because he gave into it. But that, as I've said, because Hitler got that land in Czechoslovakia, guess what? That spurred him on to take more land. So what he does is he decides to take part of Poland. Now, the interesting thing is that Hitler and Stalin had an agreement. So Stalin is a powerful leader like Hitler, like Mussolini, but he controls Russia, the USSR. And Poland is part of the USSR, but Hitler takes part of it, even though they had agreed not to. So now we have Hitler and Stalin are now at odds with each other because Hitler decided, you know what, I want to take part of Poland. So Germany decides on September 1st, 1939, it's going to invade Poland and seize part of it. And that's when we have France and Britain, they declare war on Germany. What we're going to see, and we're going to talk about this in the lesson, is that France is going to fall pretty quickly into Germany's hands. And Germany's just going to take whatever land it wants, and it's going to invade Norway and Denmark as well. So in the Phony War, the reason why it's called that is because there wasn't much fighting. War didn't really break out like it had in World War I, where everyone was ready to go. Everyone is extremely hesitant this time around. They don't want to fight. So the first year of war is called the Phony War because we don't see much fighting. And instead we see countries reluctantly trying to give in to Hitler's needs, but they are preparing for war. All right, guys, that's where we're going to leave it today. Please let me know if you have any questions tomorrow, and we can talk about it then. Toodaloo!